Okay, welcome everybody to the September update of the You Already Own It Cloud Office Hours. Thanks for joining. Um, you know, getting the weather's getting a little cooler and starting to turn to fall. And in Microsoft world, that means Ignite. And so I thought we'd do things a little differently. So normally, I think you guys are sort of used to the pattern. We send out the newsletter and as a general main topic, and that main topic is the focus of our session. However, with all the great news and events sort of coming out of Ignite this week, I thought it would be silly to get us all together on a call this month and not talk about those. So I shifted gears and I spent, hours collecting the information about what's sort of released at Ignite, and sort of aggregating for you and start to get your thoughts going on some of the big stuff coming out of Microsoft this week. So we'll give the Ignite update and then we'll open to questions, please. And while I can't promise I know the answers to all of them because a lot of the details are slim on some of these topics, please feel free to share questions or thoughts, or if you'd like opinions and you don't think I gave enough of them on the various topics, please ask for them. Be happy to jump in and give you as much as I know at the time. So again, welcome. Your You Already Own It team. It's myself, Bob Ballard, Principal Cloud Strategist here at Planet Technologies, along with Jerry Martin, Aaron Ward, and George Scott that work for me on my team. The illustrious Mary Tucker keeps us all organized. And thanks to the guidance of Steve Winter, our Vice President, for making this no additional cost service to all of our customers. So a reminder of the cloud service packs. So each month in the newsletter, a little bit. This particular week, there's fast and furious ones. We may even be making a little special edition update to go out to you guys with content from Ignite. But on a regular basis, there's still enough going on a regular month. Look inside the cloud service packs with links to what we think are our curated and most important articles. Comes out every month in the newsletter. So don't forget, you can always email us with questions, concerns, need guidance, don't know what to do at youalreadyownit@go-planet.com. That goes directly to my team. We promise to turn around answers. At least we're working on it in 24 hours and hopefully the full answer by then, depending on the circumstance. So let's get into it. It's a big week, Microsoft Ignite down in Orlando, 2018. By the way, we will not have an update from Jeff Fowler for the security section, although there's a number of security topics we'll talk about. Jeff Fowler is on the call, but he's actually sitting in a session at Ignite as we speak. So we're getting the latest and greatest up to the minute. If anything really awesome happens in your session, Jeff, start giving us real-time updates. I think that would be great. So again, if you haven't been, if you aren't aware, you haven't actually opened up LinkedIn or any blog posts or anything, Ignite is going on this week, and there's been a bunch of big announcements. It's been a little interesting vibe, right? So while there have been some larger, high-level, big thinking announcements, I think a lot of the announcements were much more about tactical improvements to products you use. And, so instead of us talking, tons of time about things that will be relevant to you 3 years from now, I think there's a lot to talk about things that are relevant right away. But as we think about it, in my mind, the stuff that's come out, right, have fallen into three categories. One is cool stuff, and, we are technologists, so we need to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the cool things that came out there at Ignite. And so I'll take just a few minutes to highlight some of the cool gee whiz moments that we saw that come out there, and then a whole section of stuff that I would call short-term actionable. Right, it's either releasing or releasing in the next few months, and things that I think our customers will take advantage of right away. Then a few things that are more long-term vision things that will help paint the picture, and just things you need to be considering as you're thinking through some strategies, etc. So on to the cool stuff. So the first thing, from the gee whiz moment, the big video that's been around all over the internet on the technology side is Microsoft Surface Hub 2. There's not tons of details, although I did include a link. There is, a decent amount of things. The big thing that's not out right now is price. But there's a couple of things that I think are important. So number one, as Microsoft doubles down on sort of the interactive collaboration technologies of Teams, and things that were formerly integrated with Skype, the Surface Hub is becoming more and more prevalent in customers. The ability to have a touchscreen interactive environment for conferencing and team collaboration. It's going to be out in the second quarter of 2019. So if we're planning for this, that's sort of the time frame that puts you in, April, May, June. It's fully integrated with Teams and other Microsoft technologies. One important thing that I thought was really interesting, and there's been a number of takes on this, I'll give you mine, right? So one of it is, so this first version is called the Surface Hub 2S. The Surface Hub 2S is the one that will be out in Q2 of 2019. It has some of the features you see in the video, but not quite all of them. Big ones, meaning the ability to actually turn the device in either vertically or horizontally and have it auto adjust to that, so that I could actually mount it on a swivel so that I can turn it either way depending on the workload I'm doing on it. The other one is to having multiple people log in with and sort of splitting the Surface into, I'm logged in as Bob Ballard, you're logged on as Sharon Smith, and we can actually interact between the two accounts and drag and drop things from each other's accounts, and a bunch of really interesting scenarios there. That is not available in the S model. That comes out in the X model, which is a little further down the road. There's not exact details on that, but I think the important thing here, unlike sort of what happens in our iPhone world, we're not saying, hey, that's coming in the next version, and we're asking you to spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, whatever the price is going to be for this thing, today, and then upgrade it in a year when some gee whiz stuff comes out. We're actually just going to ask you to upgrade the processing module, which will cost a fraction of the price, and pop that in. So interesting scenario. There's been some people that have sort of talked about this as a negative. I'm going to say in general it's positive from my perspective, and that is because this thing is upgradable, there could be even subsequent upgrades available from processing capabilities and technological capabilities that I can pop in there without having to actually buy a new device. That sort of protects my investment over time, which typically in these conference services type devices is not the case. So included in the deck, which I'll send out to everyone, I have a link that takes you to the announcement on the Microsoft blog page, including a pretty awesome video if you haven't seen it already. Many of you have. One other gee whiz moment that I thought was really interesting, simultaneously with Ignite, and right now the name escapes me, I can't remember exactly, but there's a Microsoft Dynamics conference that happens sort of co-located with Ignite. And one of the real interesting, cool moments that came out of this is this whole platform story about Dynamics plus HoloLens, right? Calling augmented reality remote guidance. So the idea behind it is, I have a Dynamics-driven sort of field deployment team. Now, obviously, there's commercial ramifications for this. The person fixing your refrigerator, or your furnace, or your plumber, or your whatever. But I know we also have a lot of public sector customers. So things like public safety folks, DPW, DOT is, I have deployed you, say, through some sort of 311 activity or other thing to go do something, even HHS. I'm using Dynamics to schedule it. While in it, I can actually examine the utility pole, the pothole, the whatever, and actually get map the area and get access to recommended guidance, instructions, close, automatically take the pictures and have it attached to the open ticket. There's a lot of really interesting scenarios, some pretty powerful video demonstrations that are also on the link that I posted here. Again, just kind of a gee whiz thing. We've all talked about, I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist or to be the super nerdiest person to think the concept of HoloLens is very cool. The practical use case scenarios that are out there for the enterprise have been limited. This is the first real one that Microsoft has kind of come to the market with. That's a real and available and can be deployed. So if there's interest there from you, go click on the link when I send out the deck. Check that one out. I think it's pretty cool. So, apologies. So now for sort of the reality place that we all need to be, right? So we all have regular day jobs. We work in enterprise. We do business stuff. Those things are cool, and there may be use cases for us. But let's get into some of the stuff that's going to really impact our daily lives. So number one, Office 2019 is here. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say the majority of the people that are on this call are Office 365 customers. What might be more interesting to know is how many are actually deployed on Office Pro Plus bits out of Office 365 versus volume license. So if you're on Office 365, you will know, if it hasn't already happened to you, you will notice over the next couple of months that the name Office 2016, for instance, if you're on it, will disappear and it'll just say Word, Office 365, Excel, Office 365. If you haven't seen it already, you will see it. Office 2019 really is just the aggregation of all the monthly feature releases that have come to your Office Pro Plus bits into a physical product, right? So if I am still, for whatever reason, deploying volume license bits, that I can deploy Office 2019 and catch up with our folks that are on Office Pro Plus. Now that being remembered, that in mind, just know the second that you deploy that, Office Pro Plus continues to add new features and your feature parity starts to grow again between what you have if you're in the volume license world. So while perpetual licenses are living for now, and there's even some talk that maybe even one more further version, say Office 2022, may exist for those people that need it, I think it more than ever sort of exacerbates the divergence between how long it takes features to get to the products. What if I'm deploying click to run style from Office 365 versus the volume license side of things. So in my mind, I think this just sort of solidifies that this is sort of the route to go. If you have questions or concerns about that, feel free to reach out to us at the You Already Own It alias that I talked about earlier. So the next one is Teams, right? So last Ignite was the big announcement about Teams, right? And how it's sort of taking over duties for Skype for Business. There's been talk about the sunsetting of Skype for Business, and whether if you're a new tenant and you're just going to be getting Teams, and if you're there's a process for automatic upgrades if your enterprise is under 500 users, and starting to come out the details of how that's all working out. But there were some other announcements that just came out that I thought I'd sort of discuss on both the sort of unified communications element of Teams and then also the collaboration side of Teams. So a cool one on the unified communication side. So, with this capability, so at some point soon, by the way, I'm going to switch this call to be a Teams call from Skype for Business call. I haven't done it yet. But when I do, I may actually start turning on video because of this new feature. I don't need to worry about it anymore, which is what's going on in the background, right? So we've all, by the way, if anybody's ever attended, a Skype for Business call or a Teams call now, and wanted to turn on video and then suddenly looked around in your office and decided you needed to clean up all the stuff on the behind you, or the fact that you're sitting in your living room and maybe there's the dogs walking around and all those things going on. My wife used to always joke that I wasn't allowed to turn on the camera, because the living room wasn't clean enough, or my office wasn't clean enough, and all of those kinds of things. So now we have the ability to blur out the background behind us and really just focus on the user so that we can sort of abstract ourselves from where we're sitting. Pretty cool little feature. Some other things, by the way, better integration with other cloud communications products. So some integration stories with BlueJeans and some things around them. Also with on-premise devices and products. I'm really just playing catch up a little bit to make sure that Teams can deliver the same experience that we have with Skype for Business. Included in that is the ability to record meetings. Right, so I'm recording this one. I'm recording this one right now. So, that's a capability that's been around in Skype for a while. Now it's here in Teams. On the collaboration side, particularly on the mobile client, there's some really interesting scenarios. So we know, we've done a call about Teams already, and we understand it's sort of, Microsoft's trying to make it sort of the landing spot for your daily collaboration world. Well, they're building some new sort of role-based experiences and views that can be deployed, right? One around remote workers, one around shift workers, which allow you to do things like have a remote landing experience when I come on in the, if I'm a remote worker and I come on, I can actually punch in and punch out and say I'm on the clock and off the clock and create some interesting things all built into the Teams client itself. So some interesting experiences there. And then shift workers to allow things for like transitional information. When I come in, here's what's happened in the shift before you that's relevant to you and exposing that. Some pretty interesting pre-built scenarios there. Again, I actually don't have the link on here. I'll make sure by the time I send this out that I go and grab the link for this. There's some great screenshots of what that experience is. And I think ultimately there's going to be some videos posted as well. Better device support, I sort of talked about that, all the conferencing, on-premise conferencing services, et cetera, to have an integration story there. And then a couple, there's been a number of admin improvements along the way, including compliance stuff for discovery and all of that. Those have been trickling out, but particularly announced this week at Ignite was huge development improvements, right? These scenarios of card-based applications and a bunch of things. Again, a little too much to go into super deep detail without having a full deep dive on it on a call where I have about 20 things to talk about. But absolutely worth a read. And if you're thinking about betting on Teams, understanding what that sort of new development paradigm is there could be really cool and interesting for your environment. I really think Microsoft's finally trying to customize the Office 365 work experience to be your business oriented instead of just a generic experience. So here's another really big one for a lot of reasons. So the concept of Azure Virtual Desktop. And what this means is, the virtual desktop experience delivered from the cloud. And there's been a couple of solutions that have been out there already and how they've worked. There's been a lot of reasons that sort of made this sort of not been viable up until now. One of the big ones was essentially how I created virtual desktops in the past in Azure was I installed, Windows servers, big honking ones, because that's what it usually takes to run large scale virtual desktop environments. And those were really expensive. So what we have now is a fully embedded infrastructure for full desktop, virtual desktops, and app publishing as well. So I want to take a couple seconds and talk about this. So one of the reasons why some of our customers have not gone all in on Office Pro Plus or the latest version of Office, et cetera, is they have concerns over legacy applications, legacy Office plugins, some of those kinds of things, old macros that are really important that just can't be updated. Well, what if I told you that I could have an Azure service running that had, Office, had Excel 2010 with your super custom macro built into it, and I could publish it right down to the desktop of the client while running Office 2019 now, right? And so this is potentially a huge enablement for sort of deployment blockers for latest versions of Office and get us out of these concerns, right? Because I don't need to man this entire incredible infrastructure. So another really interesting feature, if you're a Windows 10 enterprise, right? So you have M365 or Windows 10 enterprise through whatever other licensing vehicle or the Windows 10 for education, you actually have at no additional charge access to this service. The only thing you pay for is whatever storage, which we know is really cheap. Let's be honest, we're talking about user desktops here. So not tons of storage involved in this, and what the VMs themselves consume. And why this is important is previously what we were paying for if I wanted to deploy a solution like this in Azure was I had to build an infrastructure as a service, take these large, very expensive Azure infrastructure as a service boxes, and I was paying for them 24/7 as they were running and what they were consuming. And even when they were idling, they were consuming significant resources sometimes because of the size of the box. Now what Microsoft is saying is you're just going to pay for when the desktops are spun up and running. And that's an enormous cost difference. I have a number of customers that I think are really going to revisit this based on these new announcements. There's more details to come. This was sort of the high level. There's a bunch more information again. I've got an additional link on this. I'll make sure that I get it out to everybody in my follow-up email. But a couple of important things. It's already optimized 100% for Office Pro Plus and Windows 10 or Windows 7, by the way. So an example, if I have some legacy applications that are keeping me from going to Windows 10, I can either run a full desktop or publish the app in a Windows 7 environment, deliver it from the internet, and drop it on that Windows 10 desktop, right? So there's a lot of barriers being removed here, and I don't need the infrastructure in my on-premises environment to do it. Another really interesting thing is it enables a bunch of device flexibility scenarios, right? So maybe what I want to do for a whole class or type of worker that I have is I give them iPads and I let them do their regular work either from the iPad, but we know that those apps for Office sometimes, while they're great, they're not quite full Office. What if I can serve up Windows 10 desktops to them on their iPads? So I get very powerful long-term, battery life and all of those kinds of things, flexibility and the devices that they want. And then I can also offer them a full desktop experience whenever they need to, and from anywhere, right? So some interesting scenarios there. And then finally, all the great security stuff that we talked about, we can now implement in a desktop environment. So things like conditional access and all of those kinds of things embedded into this solution. So I can say, I'll only let you access it if it comes from this managed device and these conditions are met and these things about your identity and all that stuff can be implemented in that as well. So it creates a much more secure remote access scenario than I think we have in a lot of cases. So there's a bunch of really interesting things. I think this is, well, I have this in the short-term play, and I think there's definitely a series of customers in certain use case scenarios where this is short-term. I think this is the beginning of the viability of very performant, powerful remote desktop experience that may change the kinds of devices we see out there in the real world as time goes by. SCCM, Intune / EMS, all of these things together. There's a couple of big things on there. Number one is I can now use Intune to do 32-bit app deployments for Windows. One of the big things, there's a lot of things that are holding Intune back as a Windows desktop management tool. Now I can deploy 32-bit apps with them. Some Windows 10 security baseline templates built right into Intune. So I can now take my Windows 10, if I am going to use Intune to manage my Windows 10 environment, I can actually create, I can select from a bunch of pre-built or create custom security baseline templates and just say, they must meet these guidance, and if not, make the changes that are necessary. That's a huge sort of productivity improvement and another step forward in Intune actually being viable for real desktop device management. A better Intune SCCM integration story. While I don't think that Intune is going to be able to replace SCCM for large-scale enterprises yet, the fact that what I think you're going to see first is a blurring of the line between the two, and there's a bunch of stuff on the integration side that is really sort of improving around there for a much more cohesive management experience. A really cool feature. So if I'm still not moving forward with the latest version of Office, for instance, the desktop analyzer tool that is now available for SCCM will really help me dig into what's on my machines and what's preventing me from moving forward as far as remediation to get on modern versions of Office. And then finally, machine-based conditional access, right? So we talk a lot about, how on where your location is or the type of device you have or what your identity or rules are set around on some of these calls previously around conditional access, right? So now we can add in the condition of your machine and its circumstances into conditional access policies as well. Again, Just another tool in your toolbox to do some really powerful stuff. So that's a lot to take in. There will be more details as these details come out, and if these topics warranted, we will be doing much more thorough and deep dives on these topics from sort of the short-term actionable side of things. Now let's look a little bit more long-termish stuff, just to sort of bring it up and things you need to be thinking about. And some of these are sort of gray area with some short-term elements and some long-term ones. So on the data side, this part of it is really short term, right? So SQL 2019 is here with support for Apache Spark and Hadoop distributed file system. So these are, more cutting edge technologies and sort of this blurring the gap between relational and non-relational databases, and it's sort of unifying the experience. So there's a lot of really cool and interesting, powerful things. There will be much more to come about what SQL Server 2019 can and how it integrates into Data Lake and Azure, as well as Hadoop, and all these things sort of being pulled together for the hybrid experience of cloud and premises-based, application database stuff. So this next one's a little more long-term initiative, but what we're really starting to see is, as the explosion of data and analytics, we know, right, that our customers have data sources and sets and information and all of these things that are sort of spread across disparate systems in disparate formats. So Microsoft is really looking at, sort of building this open data initiative across platforms. So the first to sign up are Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP. Look for many more to join this so that we can have sort of exportable and interchangeable data so that I can take applications across these various systems, take their data, combine it, and do better analytics with things like that. So that's there's a lot of talk about this. Obviously gained a lot of press. It was in the keynote. It's more of a long-term play, but the idea is we want to make these systems interchange better with each other so that now we have these very powerful capabilities up in Azure with AI and analytics and all of these things that we can make this stuff play nicer together. And then one other one, there was a bunch of conversation around the Cortana kit for enterprise, and really what that is just better and smarter tools for building botnets. And why this lives in the data section in particular is, in public sector, more and more, we're seeing our customers very interested in aggregating information across disparate data sets and letting botnets or Cortana kit for enterprise actually, sort of generate, question and answer automated systems to get people the information. Scenarios we know of is, what if I took, the white pages for an organization, another table that talks about the various services that those organizations do, and enable the botnets to sort of quickly sort of aggregate those two things together. Hey, I need help with getting dog licenses. Well, the agency that handles dog licenses this. Here's the call information. Here are their hours. Here is this. Here is that. Maybe it's scraping public website. It's scraping a couple of things like that. The ability to get your citizens better information faster through botnets is a really growing focus for our customers today. The next one, and there's a lot. I can do an entire new session, and it may be something that we talk about in the near future on sort of the direction and what's happening with Microsoft ATP and security and compliance overall across the board. So a big announcement there was sort of the unification into a single management structure, all the security products that Microsoft has, so that there's a better story around integration and less overlapping features and less confusion as to what to use where. So things like, we already know that Microsoft's been throwing around the advanced threat protection, and there's Office advanced threat protection, Exchange advanced threat protection, and Office 365 advanced threat protection, and Windows advanced threat protection. So all of these things are getting unified into a single product management structure so that they can feed each other. There's this thing called the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph. Think of it like a lot of you are familiar with Delve, right? So Delve looks at the data in your organization and your usage statistics and patterns on Office 365 and tells your users about things. This is how much time you're spending in meetings. Here are people that you might want to collaborate with, since they seem to be talking about similar things. There's all kinds of really interesting things that you can do by looking across your tenant from, here's recommended things and people and activities for you. Well, they're taking that same kind of artificial intelligence and applying it to security and connecting everything from cloud app security to the Azure Security Center to advanced threat protection, Exchange Online protection, DLP stuff, all of those things together to give you a holistic view to say, hey, because this thing is through cloud app security, this activity is happening over here in your Salesforce thing, combined with this thing happening on your desktops, combined with this email that was sent out, seems to be there's some sort of compromise, right? And be able to aggregate and present all that. The dashboarding on this is getting incredible. Again, sending out the link to this and the follow-up email. You should look at the details around this. There's some really incredible progressions there. The other thing that sort of goes along with this is, we know many of you have compliance standards that you need to meet. There's been a few out there like 800-53 that Microsoft has sort of compliance dashboards already built so that we can look holistically across your environment, and that's been extending to Azure, and eventually we'll also extend it to on-premise infrastructure as well if you wanted to say, here's where you are in terms of mapping these compliance standards to the actual implementation you have. They added about a dozen new ones. One of the big ones, just for, and I don't know who's on this call exactly right now at this moment, but one of the big ones is NIST 800-171, of course, GDPR. There's a number of others. Again, the article kind of breaks down these, but some of these we have customers specifically clamoring for help with. We have a lot of NIST 800-171 for federal DoD contractors. This is a huge new compliance standard that's been put on them, and they're struggling to understand how they stay compliant. And with that, that is my wrap up in 35 minutes. The highlights of Ignite. Again, there will be much more to come as the details come out about these products and release dates and how soon they'll be rolling out into tenants. But I wanted to kind of get you guys caught up as to what your head needs to be thinking about as the coming days, weeks, months unfold, as some of the big stuff that comes out of Ignite. As I always joke at the end, this session brought to you by Azure Advantage. That is Planet's, managed services for Azure, getting support when you need ongoing daily, weekly, monthly tasks, being able to outsource this across the management, particularly for new customers. We're finding a lot of traction around there of how do I just get through the early stages of going to Azure. Maybe Azure Advantage would be a great way for you to do that. And with that, there's thank you. I want to open it up to questions. I know there was a lot of things I talked about. Are there any questions out there? Feel free to take yourself off mute and ask any questions.
This is Tanya over at the Housing Authority.
Hi, Tanya. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Yeah, I saw a whole lot of stuff going on as far as Ignite. I didn't get to go, unfortunately, but are you going to have, is there going to be like some sort of huge README file or white paper on the various different, the stuff that you brought up, for instance? There's a lot more detail, obviously, that has come out, but on a per topic level, is there going to be any kind of resource to find out more specifications on?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. What I'm going to try to do, and you're going to need to give me, normally I'd try to get my, sort of follow-up email out in a day or two. It might take me a little longer because I want to make this a little more guidance on all of the topics. And if there's any other ones, because obviously I couldn't do 100 topics, what I think, if you guys can give me a few days or my team a few days, what I want to do is create an email that is, so all of the stuff that I got this information from all came from either direct Microsoft blogs or key industry sources that were commenting on them, right? So there's a lot more content in those articles than obviously I can put in, a 35-minute slide presentation. So I'm going to try to aggregate all those up together. We also, by the way, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, In our newsletter, we are generally doing this on a monthly basis, as here are the top 5 or 6 things you need to know with some detailed articles behind them. We're sending that out as part of the newsletter every month anyway, but specifically for Ignite, what I'd love to do, if you can give me a few days, is I'll send out to this whole group. Here is, of course, everything we talked about and any other ones that I think are important that we didn't, and sort of aggregate them with links to more in-depth articles. Would that be helpful?
That would be perfect. That greatly appreciate it. Because there's a lot that I would, like to be, like to have more of my hands on, but just, there's a lot out there.
Well, and some of these topics are really big, and there will be follow-up sessions that dig into details. In some cases, right, the details are thin, right? In some of these, the details are pretty thorough, right? So, I'll get you what's out there, and this can at least help comb through it. The idea of this is to just get your brain thinking. So when I send over that news, the little email that includes the links, you may not have time to look through 37 links and read all those articles, at least out of the gate. But at least hearing today some of the things that tickle your interest, you can know which ones to focus on originally, if nothing else, right?
And I have a lot of interest, so I have a lot to focus on.
Awesome. Any other questions out there? Well, hopefully this was helpful. I will give me a few days to sort of get this together. We have our annual company meeting at the end of the week, so maybe the beginning of the week I will get this out there with sort of the links combined that make sense for this, and I'll get it out to everyone on the call so you guys can sort of have a little more thorough drill down on all of these topics. Thanks everybody for joining. I will talk to you next month.